Good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to welcome you all to this function today for a book discussion with Dr. V.S Seshadri's book titled Free Trade Agreements, India and the World. Thank you, sir, for making time to be with us. And this is our honor and pleasure to co-host this discussion with Pune International Center. Pune International Center is a platform for open discussion and for stimulating debates by mobilizing the intellectual resources with which the city of Pune is so richly endowed. The main aim of PIC is to promote activities and programs with strong emphasis on the involvement of youth so as to help build future leadership and to inspire a new generation to create positive social change based on the eternal human values enshrined in the UN Charter and the Indian Constitution. It has a wide collaborative horizon encompassing research think tanks, academic institutes, and the Ministry of External Affairs. Symbiosis School of Economics was incepted in 2008, which is a bright, young, vigorous, and growing institution with a demonstrable record of success. This very niche institute seeks to develop intellectual discipline, critical and analytical assessment, with which the result in rational thinking, along with an understanding of the need for constraint optimization and a strong urge to strive towards achieving equilibrium. We at SSC achieve these goals in an educational environment committed to excellence and academic freedom. Dr. V.S Seshadri needs no introduction, but the formality demands it. So Dr. Seshadri has genuinely set a benchmark for his multifaceted achievements. He joined the Indian Foreign Services in 1978 and served in several diplomatic posts during his career across the globe, which includes Nairobi, Brussels, Bangkok, Tehran, and Washington, D.C. He is also on deputation to the Ministry of Commerce from the year 1999 to 2003, when he was the Joint Secretary responsible for WTO matters. Dr. Seshadri was first resident ambassador of India to Slovenia, Ljubljana from the year 2007 to 2010. He then served as an India's ambassador to Myanmar in Yangon from 2010 to 2013. On his return to India, he held the position of vice chairman of the think tank RIS from the year 2004 to 2017. Thereafter, he was associated with the Confederation of Indian Industry in connection with a study project relating to the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Dr. Seshadri joined the Delhi Police Group in January 2020 as a senior fellow for economic security. Dr. Seshadri had his college education in Bangalore and Hyderabad and secured his PhD in applied mathematics from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore in 1978. He has contributed a number of research articles and discussion papers on trade and international economic issues. He is the author of extensively researched and acclaimed book that we are going to have a discussion on, Free Trade Agreements, India and the World, published by the Oxford University Press, which was released in May 2022. Once again, our heartiest welcome, sir. We are very honored to have you among us. Further, I would like to warmly welcome the other distinguished panelists on the dais, Professor Sudipa Majumdar and Dr. Rajan. Professor Sudipa Majumdar is a professor of economics with over 20 years of experience in academia and industry. She holds a PhD in economics from IGIDI Mumbai, postgraduate certificate in advanced statistical learning, Stanford University, US, postgraduate certificate in higher education, Middlesex University, UK. Professor Majumdar is skilled in econometrics, statistics, economic analysis, and curriculum development with dozens of publications in high-ranking international academic journals. She had headed many projects under the Institute of Repute, including the Wharton Business School Research Center, UNICEF, NABARD, and the UN Office for South-South Cooperation and the British Academy of Research Center, to name a few. She is a strong education and research professional and a fellow in higher education for the Higher Education Academy, UK. Welcome, ma'am. Dr. Ranjan Kumar Das is an associate professor at Symbiosis School of Economics with over 15 years of teaching and research experience. at many academic and research institutes such as ICRIER, NCAER, IEG, and IPE Global. He has a distinguished publication record in academic journals and books worldwide that includes World Economy, Economic Modeling, Empirical Economics, Journal of Policy Modeling, Journal of International Trade and Economic Development, Journal of International Trade, and Singapore Economic Review. Recently, Sir has published an article as a World Bank working paper. His areas of interest includes financial economics, international trade, growth, applied econometrics, and development economics. Welcome you, sir. So once again, I welcome one and all present here, including Dr. Seshadri among us, to this event or event come discussion on the book that he has released. So now may I please now request Dr. Abhay Vaidya, sir, for a formal book launch on behalf of Symbiosis School of Economics on the stage. To proceed further with the discussion, may I please request Sudipa ma'am to take it over.
Hello, everyone. We are extremely honored to have with us today Dr. Seshadri. And thank you, Pune International Center, for giving us this opportunity and for collaborating with us for this event. The book on free trade agreements, India and the world, gives us a comprehensive view of the history, the evolution, the journey of FTAs across the world over the years. So what I've read in the book is that FTAs started sometime after the World Wars. It started as a very small way. It was only to reduce the tariffs and to promote free trade. It was more like an economic tie, just to foster some integration between the countries. But what we've seen over the years is that today it's become more and more complex. We have legal perspectives, we have environmental perspectives. So, sir, why don't we start with an overview from you about the book?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I have to thank two very prestigious institutions in Pune, the Pune International Center and the Symbiosis School of Economics, for hosting this discussion. And to all of you, most important, for being present here. This book is basically intended for the students. So that is why I have particular pleasure in seeing many of you here, because as Dr. Sudipa Majumdar has just now said, it is becoming increasingly an instrument for undertaking trade in a more liberalized manner, but between limited set of countries. In a sense, it is a little branch off from the multilateralism that guided the principles of WTO, of non-discrimination, and MFN treatment, which were the basic foundations of WTO. So this, in a sense, is a slight departure from that, but that is provided for in the WTO agreement itself. But let me come back to the question that has been posed. What is the book about? So the book, as the title says, Free Trade Agreements, India and the World. So the idea of the book was to present in one volume what is happening on the FTA front globally and what is happening on the FTA front domestically. I wouldn't say domestically because it involves other partners, but India's initiatives on the FTA front and what's happening globally. I thought it would be important to take both together rather than just look at India's initiatives, because there is much that is happening globally. And to some extent, the FTAs that India has been involved in, have been somewhat of limited scope. Our FTAs have been principally in the South Asia region, SAARC FTA with Sri Lanka and so on. And of course, you cannot really call them FTA. These are more in the sense of development cooperation agreements with Bhutan and Nepal, which were really trade and transit agreements. We also have FTAs with ASEAN as a whole, but also with two individual ASEAN countries, Malaysia and Singapore. And additionally, FTAs with Japan and Korea. So this is the sum of our FTA landscape as it was till 2020. In fact, no FTAs were concluded between 2011 and 2020, although we tried. They did not come to a successful outcome. In fact, we also participated, as you may all know, in a regional agreement called RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. But that again did not come to a conclusion. So, let me not go too far into this and abort some of the questions that may be asked, but to sum it up. So, in a sense, what this book is about is to capture the limited canvas of India's FTAs, which were largely restricted to South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Northeast Asia, that is Japan and Korea. Whereas also to bring to light what was happening globally. And there, as Dr. Majumdar has said, started much earlier. In fact, the first, you can say, FTA started with European Community in the 50s. That gave rise to a number of other regions to try a similar exercise. You can say the first wave was led by Europe in 50s. The second wave in the 80s, led by both US and EU. US started its FTA with Israel. That was the first FTA of US in the early 1980s. And then NAFTA. Before it was with Canada, but it expanded to NAFTA, which came into force 94. And the third FTA wave was a flood. It started late 90s and beginning of 2000 onwards. So while till about 2000, there were only about 80 FTAs globally. As of today, the number of notified FTAs to the WTO exceed 350. So you can see the way in which the FTA landscape has expanded. And in contrast, the limited FTA exposure of India. And one last point before I finish. In between 2009, there was also a move towards mega regional FTAs. And this was TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, Transatlantic and Trade Investment Partnership between EU and US, which did not succeed. Even TPP had to be cut short. USA got out of it. It was the first act by President Trump. It became CPTPP and our own RCEP in which we were involved, but we got out. So you can see the FTA landscape which has moved on globally and the limited canvas of India. So all this is captured in the book. Sorry if that was a lengthy answer.
No, not at all, not at all. In fact, we saw that with the global financial crisis in 2008, there was a big criticism of globalization and trade. And then we saw, as you said, US come out of the NAFTA and even started imposing tariff barriers. And after that, we saw the complete disruption of trade due to COVID and the lockdown. So all this kind of gives us a picture that countries should become more self-reliant. And maybe there is a a trend which is in favor of self-reliance with looking at the last decade. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, this goes a little beyond the book. In terms of present trend towards countries thinking in terms of self-reliance. Now, this has been happening in a way, in a small way since 2008, thanks to the global financial crisis, which raised questions about globalization. Uh, then they moved towards mega regional agreements started. There was a feeling that that could possibly be a solution, but with Trump getting US out of it and President not making any effort to get back into TPP, it does look a big question mark. On top of that, you also had President Trump raising basic questions in terms of WTO. Like, for example, he used economic security as an argument. That is, economic security of US. As an argument to impose tariffs on steel, aluminium from the whole world. This was blatantly against WTO rules. Absolutely. He also imposed tariffs on China's goods, saying that China was violating certain intellectual property rules, etc. Now, be that as it may, come COVID, things got worse. Because here became a situation where each country was fending for itself. And whether it is mass initially, or whether it's oximeter, whatever, or the vaccines. Even the advanced countries were looking after their own needs. But most importantly, China was seen as imposing coercive measures, using trade as a tool. You remember Australia questioning China. We must investigate how COVID originated, implying thereby maybe some China had something to do with it, or it's not coming out fully openly. So in retaliation, China stopped imports of several Australian goods. So this was a case of use of trade as an instrument of coercion for non-commercial objectives. But those are issues which I think are still being questioned. The world is now undertaking what you can call decoupling, de-risking, whatever you may assign it. But I think that goes far beyond this book. So let me not digress. I will leave it there.
Okay, one more question from my side. So we have seen Europe or US use these free trade agreements at the FTAs to actually build an economic union, so to say. So the European Union or the NAFTA or some similar cases in GCC, MENA region. But India also has the FTAs with all its regional neighbors, but we don't really see a European Union kind of an economic union or anything near to that building over here. So what is the reason for that?
This is again a question that perhaps is not addressed in this book. You're right, absolutely, that European Union has been able to use the logic of economic union to also get closer economic integration and therefore political integration. To some extent, the experiences of World War II, when neighboring European countries were at war with each other, made them realize that that's not the way to go, and this is far better way to uh, be in the interests of both countries or together. I think EU has been a success. Although some people can question if UK can get out of Brexit through Brexit, will other countries follow? We don't know. But the fact remains that more and more countries still want to get into the EU, like some of the Serbia, for example, or even Ukraine for that matter. Likewise, in the ASEAN region, ASEAN FTA, although not of the same level of economic integration as European Union, has certainly been a successful one. Now, certain other regions tried it, including SAARC, including East African trade, Kenya, Tanzania, etc. on those days, and also in the Caribbean. Some of them are doing reasonably well. Now, as far as we are concerned, I think you have a neighbor which does not even give you MFN treatment. Where is the question of an FTA? So, I think we have to contend with that. Otherwise, with the rest of the SAARC countries, with Nepal, Bhutan, we have very close agreements. With Bangladesh, SAARC is there, but I think we are in the process of negotiating a deeper FTA. I understand it's going to start very soon. We have an FTA with Sri Lanka. In fact, that is the first comprehensive FTA that India signed.
Which I read in your book.
Yeah. So, it's not a great success. There are suspicions which we still have not been able to come over. But I think our idea is to therefore see if we can show as an example with ASEAN and other countries, maybe our neighbors will also see what are the advantages.
Thank you. Good afternoon all. It is a privilege for me to discuss with Ambassador Seshadri, and he has written a very good book which is very useful for undergraduate, postgraduate and PhD students also. The book starts with the scope of, let's say, WTO and FTA, and then starts with SAPTA, South Asia Trade Agreement. It goes to ASEAN and the recent free trade agreement that ASEAN we have withdrawn from them, and also futuristic discussion that is going on with EU and USA and some other discussions. Very, very useful books, and I recommend all the UG and PG students who go through it and find out some clues and some questions for your answer or your whatever you are looking for. So, sir, congratulations for writing a very good book. I have gone through that. So, my first question is, I will ask only from the books. I will not deviate from.
No, anything is you can ask.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you, sir. So, it was a GATT and then transited to WTO. And during that time, many developing countries dreamed about that their contribution, that export, everything will go off. That did not realize. Then we had a very, very successful discussion on DDA rounds.
On?
DDA rounds or Doha rounds.
Yeah.
2001. It was very extremely comprehensive. But after that, everything fallen apart. Nothing has happened. So, is it the RTA remain the alternative strategy for developing countries, or still WTO relevant in this context?
That's a question on which I don't think anybody has an answer. Everyone is hoping that the next ministerial conference, due to take place in Abu Dhabi in February, may give some indication whether WTO can still be revived. The last ministerial 2 years ago, not 2 years ago, last year, I think, had come up with the idea of certain substantial reforms on the ways of working of WTO, including restoring the dispute settlement system, etc. These are still under discussion in the WTO. I'm not sure whether it will be able to come to a quick decision. The reason why I'm saying this is not only due to the complexities arising from the you can say ambitions, different ambitions of different groups of countries. They are certainly there, but also because of the China factor. Certain basic questions are arising how to deal with China. Because one point of view is that this is a non-market economy. Some will dispute that, but US, for example, is having fundamental problems with the manner in which China has been able to build up its capacities by giving subsidies and through various other means, because these are all opaque. It's not transparent, whereas WTO requires these things to be transparently put across in terms of notifications, etc. Like, for example, electric vehicles, most recent. They are flooding the market in Europe, and everybody is getting alarmed. And so Europe has launched anti-subsidy investigation. But the point I'm trying to make is there is this question mark about whether existing WTO rules are adequate to deal with an entity called China. But if you have to reform WTO, then you need China's agreement also, because China is now a member of WTO and WTO decisions are taken by consensus. So that is why I say it's a big question mark. And therefore, countries are taking the line that continuing to have FTAs may be the route ahead. And it appears to me, I am now out of the government, but it appears to me the government in India is also possibly taking a similar line. And at the moment, the government is active in terms of pursuing negotiations with quite a few countries. And from the news reports, it looks like the FTA with United Kingdom is imminent. People are talking about Diwali and so on, but we don't know. If it comes about, then you would have seen in the last 2 years, agreement with UAE concluded, Australia interim agreement concluded, and UK an agreement concluded. And that's very substantial progress. And that also moves away from the earlier regional focus of Asia, Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, to western part of India now, UK and UAE. And also we have revived negotiations with European Union. So we have to see how it goes ahead, but it seems to me that India is possibly taking this line also because of this issue about China. Because if you recall, soon after COVID, the Atmanirbharta scheme was launched in April 2020. So there is a close relationship. And then production linked incentive schemes in 14 areas. Clearly on items where we were, even now, substantially dependent on imports from China. Medical devices, drugs, solar panels, and so on. So the idea seemed to be, and if you add up, in fact, the economic survey says this, the last one, the imports of these items into India comprise 40%. So clearly you can see the government moving ahead with the idea of reducing imports on what could easily be manufactured in India. But we have not been able to do thanks to low priced imports coming and posing a competition to our industry. So that is an issue for us also. So what is therefore the government doing? The government is on the one hand setting up these industries, hopefully with investments also from foreign investors. Response has been decent, and I won't say they have been overwhelming, but the response has been decent. At the same time, if you continue to have high tariffs, then these industries will be uncompetitive. So to provide competition, you have FTAs with countries who have greater, you can say, common understanding, similarity of interests, and who are decent to compete with, not coming up with subsidized goods. So I think this is the broad approach.
Thank you for giving very broad overview of what going to happen on maybe next coming decades. My second question is, sir, given that India has already signed 10, 12 FTAs with different countries, but the results suggest something different.
But
Couple of results, outcomes suggest something else. A couple of studies from courts and some other institutions, they have found that we are not able to utilize the FTA opportunities. Our trade deficits with the FTA partner countries has gone up. So where we have gone wrong? Are we, let's say, we are not able to link our industry with trade, or still disintegrated, or something else? Maybe our infrastructure or other things is very deficit, so we are not able to up to that level. So what need to be done?
I think it is all of what you said. And this is what has been discussed in the chapter 7 of the book in some detail. And because when I was with the RIS as vice chairman, my task was also to appraise the implementation of our FTAs with 3 major partners, that is with Singapore, with Japan, and with Korea. So each of them I took about 8 to 9 months each to study, and also to it involved visit to those capitals as well, and to meeting our industry. In fact, the report on Japan was released by Honorable Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, and the report on Singapore was released by the Commerce Secretary, then Rita Theotia. So all these also form part of the book. But coming to the substance of it, basically what I found was, number one, we did benefit to some extent for certain products. It is not that we did not benefit. So there were quite a few products in which there were positive outcomes coming to us from these agreements, both in respect of trade in goods and in respect of trade in services. I say that in chapter 3 of the book. In fact, the last table also gives details about what products we benefit. I then say also that there are certain items where we could have benefited better if those FTAs had been negotiated better. Look, I will give you an example because this is interesting to follow. Like, for example, in our FTA with Korea, the rule of origin for cut and polished diamonds says minimum value addition is 35%. Now, what does it mean? First of all, let me explain what is rule of origin. Rule of origin means the country which is exporting to you, which is an FTA partner, should have added a substantial part locally. Otherwise, it can just import from a third country and send it to you. So there has to be a substantial value addition in that country. So that is the rule of origin that confers origin. Now, you have diamond industry in India. They import raw diamonds because we don't mine diamonds. And they cut and polish. And then they export cut diamonds to various places. Sometimes they put it in jewelry, but sometimes it just goes as cut and polished diamond. Now, what is the value addition in cutting that diamond? I found it maximum 15%. Because a diamond is a high value item. And however much time you spend on it, it can't add more than 15%. Now, in our FTA with Korea, you put 35%. It's impossible. So here you have a substantial industry in the country, and frankly, in the world, we are the leader. And yet, we did not put that in. Now, in the recent agreements, this has been taken care of. So they say in the Mauritius agreement, it has been put 15%. In the UAE agreement, it is even less at 6% or so. Now, 6% may look small, but in terms of value, it is substantial. And if you look at the amount of investment that a cut and diamond polisher has to put in, it's substantial. I mean, he employs a lot of people and they are skilled people. Similarly, you have, we export a lot of refined petroleum products. Bombay High is long past. So we import the crude. And the refining involves substantial investments. But if you see the additional value on the crude, from crude to naphtha or downstream products, maximum 15%, 20%. Now again the same problem. There are other ways in the rule of origin to deal with this. Like, for example, if your original product is in a certain classification, and if your final product is in a different classification, then it is treated as a substantial origin, change in tariff classification. So there are mechanisms which other countries have used, which we should have used it better. Yet another example, for example. Like, for example, we use, another substantial export of ours is shrimps. It's a shrimp industry. And also fish meat. We export a lot to Japan. Now, you need a cryoprotectant to preserve that shrimp or fish meat. And that is important. But in our FTA with Japan, that was not included. They said it should be wholly produced. So they started rejecting consignments. I pointed this out in my report, and then subsequently this has been included. So, sum and substance of it, trade is a lot of detail. And you have to take into account these aspects to ensure that it is done. And there are also certain issues why we didn't do well. The last point, I will stop here. Like, we are exporting to Japan. Japan also has FTAs with ASEAN. Now that FTA is deeper than our FTA. So you do not have a level playing field like ASEAN. Again, the lesson to be learned is that in areas of your export strength, you should get the best possible access through the FTA. So these are things which I have pointed out, which are very important, and that could be the reasons why we didn't realize so much.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. This is my last question. So, how to integrate our MSME sector with FTA and some trade? So that is now facing very big crisis, and also given their size and capital required, they are now marginalized. So, what can be done on this context?
I think this is
Factory
also very
consumer
important
rights.
because much of our exports also take place from the MSME sectors.
Yes.
Now, first thing I found when I was doing all these studies is that the awareness about the FTAs is very limited. And you know, all this rule of origin, etc., it goes about them. But they have to learn. And some of them do know. But I think it is incumbent on export associations, Federation of Indian Exporters Organization, CII, industry bodies, to like, you know, Plastic Export Promotion Council, things like that. There are bodies. Now, each one of them, for products of their interest, they have to take the initiative, because government sitting in Delhi, how much can they do? Commerce Ministry will put it on its website, but that is not enough. So, if you go to Australia, for example, the manner in which the hand-holding is done to an exporter to be able to understand what is the tariff for this item under the FTA, what is the requirement. And top of that, you see, even if you have manufactured the product, but then you have to keep the documentation to ensure that it fulfills, because they can call that any time. So you have to preserve the documentation, and then he has to get the certificate from the Export Inspection Council that it has fulfilled the rule of origin. Now, these are all very complicated. So, if you see the FTAs that are coming up newly, not so much on tariffs, it is on simplification of these items that they focus on. Like, for example, you introduce a system of authorized export. So, if a MSME guy is able to convey to the Export Inspection Council that he is open to inspection anytime and produces documents, etc., he can be one of the authorized exporters, in which case every consignment need not go through this process. So these are issues which we must focus on and facilitate export. This is the only way.
Yeah. Sir, your book also touches upon some of the newer perspectives like digital trade or environmental issues. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about what is happening in that front?
You see, this is a very challenging issue because unlike developed countries whose policies in these areas are a little evolved, we are still in the process of defining our policies based partly also on trial and error. Like, for example, right now, you are aware that on digital trade, we are going through a series of parliamentary discussions on a host of issues. Privacy is one, data security is another, and whether we can allow movement of data back and forth from the country to outside and back. There are security implications. There are all that. Let's be clear. Data today is oil, equivalent to it is a, it's a it has a
Treasure.
price.
Yeah.
So free movement of data, and somebody else analyzes and makes money out of it. Why should we be party to that? But the big IT guys sitting elsewhere, they are being very keen to push us,
Yeah.
so that we finalize quickly. We have to be careful. At the same time, we can't just sit idle. So we have to find ways by which you leave enough elbow room for your future development. At the same time, make some commitments based on trial and error. This is the only way we can. Similarly, for example, environment. Now, EU is pushing ahead with this carbon border adjustment mechanism, etc., which EU is claiming that it's WTO compatible, but frankly, I do not think so. And it undermines several of the basic principles laid down by the Paris Agreement. So what they are doing is bringing non-trade issues to the trade forum, because trade is one area where you can leverage. So we have to be careful. Likewise, labor is yet another issue. In the USMCA agreement, which is the revised NAFTA agreement, the Mexico has been shortchanged, you can say, because they want certain parts of the automotives to be manufactured with a labor cost of at least $16 per hour. Now, this is undermining the wage competitiveness of Mexico. So we are very clear in our mind as far as labor is concerned, while things like conditions of labor, etc., are something that we can look into. But if you are putting into question my wage competitiveness, that's my asset. How can you do that? So I think we have to be therefore a little wary of including those issues. I'm not saying you can rule it out, because in today's circumstances that looks unlikely, unrealistic. But at the same time, we need a lot more research and also argumentation to ensure that we protect ourselves.
Why don't we open it out for questions? Ishita, will you take it up? She'll come here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ambassador Dr. Seshadri. This was wonderful. I'm also from the area of international trade, so it was delightful listening to your insights. We will take on some more questions from the audience, and there are some questions that some students who were very interested, but they had another very important exam schedule who couldn't come in, but they've sent the questions.
Okay.
So I will communicate it back to them that whatever transpires here. So you've touched upon this question already, but parts of what this question will entail. But I'll still ask this question because the student told me specifically that this should be showcased. The student has asked whether Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India affect the way FTAs, the dynamics of the FTA, and the other way around with India.
I would emphatically say no, because Atmanirbhar Bharat is your definition of enhancing, your way of enhancing domestic manufacturing in India. And nobody can complain about that, because as of now, if you see the share of manufacturing in our total GDP, it is fairly low. And it's about 15-16%. And for a developing country like India, particularly when we are also looking at enhancing employment, this is not sustainable. So I think we are certainly within our rights, and I would go as far as to argue that, look, we had a fair number of industries in a number of areas. Like, for example, even bulk drugs. I don't know if students here are aware, but we used to have a fairly robust bulk drug sector till about early 90s. But thanks to drugs being manufactured at much lower prices, they collapsed. We used to have a blanket industry in Patiala. We used to have a cycle industry in Ludhiana. We used to have small scale industries in Surat. Not of this kind that's there now, but earlier. Now, all those have disappeared. Now, to some extent, we can say we have not paid enough attention in the past, possibly. But equally, they have also arisen due to fairly low priced imports coming into the country. Now, this cannot happen. And services will not give you the employment in terms of numbers that we need. So as a country, it is incumbent on us to do this. And WTO rules really do not prohibit you doing it unless you get on to some subsidies, giving subsidies in a big way, which could be violative of WTO principles. But let me hasten to tell you, and this is within the room, now that the dispute settlement body is not functional, you can be a little more, you can say, expansive in doing whatever you want to do. Go ahead, get this done, particularly at a time when the world is also looking at China plus one option. So there is this window of opportunity that you must use, and I think we are very well within our rights to do so.
Thank you so much. I will convey this to the student, and I think a very good question and a fantastic insight as an answer. Thank you. You mentioned the diamond industry, and in class recently, I had also given out this same example of Surat being the hub for all kinds of diamond cutting and polishing and GVCs, etc. But with the advent of AI, a lot of diamond cutting happens in Canada also. But it is completely robotic. There is no human element over there, and probably the precision is much better, right? So, what happens to the content of trade and uh, the value add? How do we compete with value add when there is AI that is doing it so much better? So, are we going to perish from the number one position to no position at all globally?
You are a no less leader in AI. Don't underestimate India itself. In fact, we have several companies who are today very articulately saying that we are not behind in this. In fact, the tragedy really is, I live in Bangalore, and if you go down certain streets of Bangalore, you will find all the global corporates there. You name it, they are there. And what do our people sitting in those companies do? They provide engineering solutions, they provide design solutions. But then it goes in the name of those companies and the patents and all the rest. Now, You have therefore inherent strengths in these areas, and I'm sure they will strengthen by and by, because the basic infrastructure of IT companies is existent here, and it can be built upon, whatever the new developments. And to integrate them with manufacturing should be our goal too. So I am not so discouraged by this development. In fact, I am surprised we, if, for example, Canada is doing it, we should do it. And probably we will do it better. And the kind of work that our people in Surat do on small diamonds, this is amazing.
Yes, it is. No, this is Canada. Canada is.
I have
completely
doubts,
into,
but I could be wrong.
They've robotized this, and the diamonds are certified in Belgium. So a lot of it is not. It doesn't move from Africa to India and then to Belgium for certification.
Yes.
It's moving directly from Africa to Canada and then to Belgium for certification.
And who is sitting in Belgium? I have stayed in Brussels for 3 years. Our own people are sitting in Belgium. In fact, if you go to the Antwerp Diamond Center, many of these are our people.
Could I take any questions from the audience at this point? I have more questions from the students which I would love to ask, but if anyone would like to ask a question, yes, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Nisarga Udeshi. I am from World Trade Center. Currently, we have a prospect customer who is in the digital payment space. So you see the UPI that we have in India is developed by them. How would a digital payment be treated from the perspective of free trade agreements in countries where we do not have FTAs?
How will digital payments be treated in the trade agreement? This is a good question. I'm not sure I have a full answer, but let me attempt. There was earlier a question about digital trade becoming part of the agreement. Some of the provisions of such an agreement is to allow free movement of data. That's number one. Number two, there should be no duty charged on electronic transmissions. Now, this is already existing. In fact, this came into being in 1998, that countries not to charge on electronic transmissions. Now, several interesting questions arise. I am not coming to your question, but I am just giving you similar examples. Like, for example, digital printing. Today, it is possible that a software is sent from abroad. You have a printing machinery for any item. You have the raw material in terms of powder. You make a stent, you make a medical device. It can all be done here. Software is coming from there. Now, on the other hand, if the same item came physically, you will impose an import duty. Now, how do we make the difference? Earlier, this controversy arose in respect of books. Like, you can physically get a book, I say I put 5% duty. But you can also electronically get it. And where is the question of the border? So, there is also the difficulty of keeping track of these electronically transmitted items, how to put a duty. But there are ways. There are ways, people are looking at it. So, your question, therefore, digital payment system, if it is introduced, it will facilitate all these transactions. Now, is there a way that you can put some border in terms of movement of these payments when it is cross-border? I think I don't have an answer.
In fact, you gave me a new direction altogether of where I can probably use that payment gateway.
So there are all these issues. In fact, there is the larger question. All these big IT companies are located in Ireland or somewhere where the taxation is low, and they are charging their profits to those capitals, not where actually profit is generated. So we have introduced some measure to arrest this. So all these are related issues in some ways, for which I can only say it is under discussion, and obviously US is upset because it has a monopoly of these big companies. But even Europe, in this case, is more siding with us on this issue. So this is a difficult question. Technology makes things more difficult in certain ways, but certainly countries would like to be able to deal with it. And if profit is taken from activity taking place in our country, why should the taxation on it go elsewhere?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your question. Anybody else from the audience? Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. My
A
name is
little loud, please.
good afternoon, sir.
Switch it on.
Hello. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Alavi Vadil, and I'm from BSc second year economics student. So I would like to ask you that, like, as you have been I.F.S officer, so this is one of the, like, I can say many times people must have asked you that what has been your experience being an I.F.S officer out of the country in Brussels or any other, and how it has impacted your life, and like any suggestions you would like to give for the I.F.S aspirants or like people who will be joining soon. Thank you.
Well, I don't know how to answer this question, but I'll just give you why I wrote this book in a way that will answer your question. See, I because somehow my career took me to those capitals, apart from my own interest on trade issues, which enabled me to get a better understanding. I'll give you example. From 86 to 89, 1986 to 1989, I was first secretary trade policy in our embassy in Brussels. Now, Brussels, as you know, is the capital of European Union. And at that time, EU, their strength was about 9 or 10, and they were still digesting the integration of Spain and Portugal into the EU. So it was a very interesting process to see how sovereign countries could negotiate amongst themselves on bread and butter issues and agree on something at the end of the day. But more importantly, this was also a time when European community was moving towards single Europe. When they were, because by that time, only they had a FTA and a union, but they had not moved into free movement of capital, free movement of people. So they were framing their rule that so all the factors of production, goods, services, people, and labor and capital, they could move freely across borders, but they needed to have conditions. So it may seem ridiculous today, but I have seen discussions at that time, how much should be the size of that earth mover pedal. So all the countries sitting together, discussing and coming to a decision, because there are commercial interests involved. So and you had leaders like Margaret Thatcher, etc. Not too easy, but they had the political will to come together and also to think of a single currency. Imagine a country like Germany, which prided itself with Deutschmark or French franc. They put aside their sovereignty and thought of an euro. And today, 19 countries are having that as the common currency. So it was a very unique experience. Then, of course, I served for 4 years in Commerce Ministry as the negotiator. So 1999 to 2003. This was the time when the WTO negotiations were most active. The Doha round was kicked off, etc. And after the 9/11, there was suddenly a burst of feeling amongst countries to come together, and they launched the Doha round. Of course, subsequently it didn't go much further, but that was a period. And I was involved in the tariff negotiations, etc. And then I went to Washington. I was in charge of Minister of Commerce. So again, it gave me an opportunity to interact day-to-day basis with the USTR, trade representative. But more importantly, this was also a time when US was doing a lot of FTAs. In fact, after 2007, you can say it lost interest in FTAs. It did do the TPP and all that, but this period was the one when it entered into maximum number of FTAs. So again, for me, it was a very interesting experience. After retirement, of course, I told you I did this. So put it all together uh, was an interesting theme to work on. I live in there.
The next question from the audience. Anyone with?
Yes.
So, sir, now, of course, Pakistan is in an economic crisis, and given this very unfortunate animosity between India and Pakistan, supposing there was good regional trade in South Asia, very much on the lines of EU, and South Asia also has the potential to have a single currency, given that we all come from the same background, and almost entire South Asia was once undivided India. So, the regional progress of South Asia, is it being held back because of the absence of regional trade on the lines of India?
No, I certainly agree with you. In fact, if only countries can put aside their political differences or territorial differences for that matter, and come together and cooperate on trade, that goodwill will be enough to, in my view, generate positives all around, bring about prosperity, development to mutual advantage, rather than countries going to IMF and all the rest, or for China for that matter. But this is not happening. I think I'm talking about late 90s. This was a time when South Asia Preferential Trade Agreement was there, and the discussion was going on among the SAARC countries about moving towards SAFTA, Free Trade Agreement. Sorry. All these countries were humming and hawing. So at that time, Vajpayee ji, our Prime Minister then, said that, look, whichever country is amongst you is willing, we are ready to do a bilateral FTA. Sri Lanka came forward. And that is how we had that Sri Lanka agreement. Now, I see Bangladesh with the present leadership in a similar frame of mind, but will the present leadership continue elections and all the rest? Frankly, I don't know. But there will be issues. Like, for example, notwithstanding what is mentioned about Pakistan, you know that border trade point near Amritsar where goods are exchanged. Not now, but earlier. I have visited that place. And border trade was taking place in a very organized way, where trucks used to come from that side, drop certain items, and even tomatoes used to go from Amritsar to that side and all that. Now, there are several issues that need to be sorted out. Uh, Bangladesh, India now can almost, in a complementary way, economies. We can do a lot of things together. There are a lot of good things in Bangladesh also. So if we can get free movement of goods across the border with minimal checks, with free trade agreements, uh, that will be a big first step. Of course, that will involve, it's not an easy issue. For example, the truck traders, the truck owners of Bangladesh will say, I should have the right to carry the goods. Likewise, from this side, they're all politically involved. So it will need a lot of, just as I mentioned about Europe, setting aside a little bit of sovereignty aside, thinking about the longer term interests, settling the issue, we can do wonders. Uh, Maybe the best way to start will be to set an example with one or two neighbors, get it going, and the others will see it as an example. And there is no other way, you can't push them beyond a point. Then you push them, then they think you have a vested interest. Uh, then that will not go forward. But you have raised a very important point, and people say it's tragically, you should start with your own region.
Thank you, sir. Yes. This will be the last question in the interest of time, although we have many more lined up.
No,
Please carry.
This question is basically imposing import tariffs, customs duties. Will it help India in the long term to make or to manufacture the products which are techno-economically highly competitive? For example, steel. We work with Germany very closely. Steel across the world, generally in Europe and India, is more or less the same. Certain chemical additives in the construction industry, in fact, are cheaper now. So, if we use a strategy of imposing import tariffs for the raw materials, for the goods, maybe semi-finished, finished, whatever pyramidal it is, will it really help our country to boost the competitiveness, the quality of our products from the exports point of view? Thank you.
It is an issue that I don't know if I've got your question correctly, but if you are raising an issue about high tariffs and whether it will not undermine our competitiveness, the answer is yes and no. I think what the government is trying to do, as far as I can understand, is to have a reasonably high MFN tariff that is applicable to the likes of China and all the rest. But have FTA tariffs at a low level with a fair number of countries, not just one or two, fair number of countries, from which competitive goods can come. But it is a fair competition. I would certainly not recommend low tariff vis-a-vis China, because their intentions are different. They are using trade for acquiring dominance, and then that dominance will be used somewhere else. Uh, that should not be encouraged. That will undermine our security, everything. So, from that point of view, I think it makes sense to keep a higher MFN tariff at the moment, but try and see as many countries as you can, but of course in your interest, uh, to see that you have an FTA arrangement. In fact, in this book, I've also argued, like for example, there are certain products, chemicals, with figure only in our FTA with Singapore. Now, Singapore therefore has the advantage. So what will the Singapore producer do? Suppose the tariff is, let's say, 10% on that product, but Singapore can export it to us duty free. So the exporter from Singapore will push its cost at 5% and send it to us. So the importer in India is not getting the full advantage of the tariff concession. So I have also argued that even amongst the FTA members on all items, there should be sufficient competition so that our importer gets the best value. You have to make use of the FTA. So I think that is the broad strategy that is being followed. Uh, Whether it will work or not will depend on the number of FTAs we are able to stitch up. But I think it's a decent strategy to proceed with at this point of time.
This may work out in short run, not in the long run.
Pardon?
This may work out in the short run, but not in the long run.
Let's see. We don't know what the future holds, because there is a lot of debate going on globally about where this is fragmentation, decoupling, de-risking, where this is all leading up to. You can see China also making overtures to various countries. They are smart. So, but I would go against this. If you have zero tariffs, everything will work out. I do not accept that at this point of time.
Right.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed a wonderful interactive session. Thank you for all the questions. And it was really an honor to have you here among us, sir, once again. And we are here privileged to have Dr. Abhay Vaidya, Director PIC. So may I now please invite sir on the stage to felicitate our guest of honor on the behalf of PIC.
Yeah, please, sir.
So we have two books published by Pune International Center. One is Rising to the China Challenge, which was written by authors from PIC after the very unfortunate Taiwan incident. And I must say that Ambassador Gautam Pambawale is one of the authors of this book, and we would be very happy to present that to you. The other book is India's Pathways to Success, winning in the next decade. And this book is primarily about the pathways that India needs to take towards 2047, when we complete 100 years of independence. So it's a book that should be in your libraries. Probably it's already there. Symbiosis is an institutional partner of Pune International Center. And we are very happy to present these books to our guest speakers.
One final word, if I may. Please allow me to thank Ambassador Gautam Pambawale. He was the one who was particularly keen, once I told him about the book, that I could come over and he will suitably arrange interaction. So through you, I request you to kindly convey my heartfelt thanks to him for the initiative he took, and I'm so happy to be here. Of course, I miss him. I was looking forward to seeing him, but he told me he had to go some urgently on some aspect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, please. Yeah. Please come here.
Thank you.
May I now please request Professor Sudipa Majumdar to felicitate our guest of honor on the behalf of Symbiosis School of Economics.
Sir, this is our
Oh, I get one more.
the international flag from Symbiosis.
Thank you.
So maybe
In fact,
maybe we
I
can, put it back.
came to Symbiosis University, if I remember right, in 2016 or so,
Okay.
and talk about RCEP.
Okay. All right.
But that was a different campus.
We have 5 campuses here.
Okay.
So yeah. Okay.
May I please invite Ms. Geeta Hausmane, the Associate Director at Maratha Chamber of Commerce, Industries and Agriculture, to formally propose a vote of thanks for the
We can sit down.
So there is a slight correction. I work with Maratha Chambers also, but currently I am working with Pune International Center as a senior program director officer. So I think you must have taken it from LinkedIn and there is a small error there. So on behalf of Pune International Center, I, Geeta Hausmane, thank Dr. V.S. Seshadri, I.F.S. retired, Professor Sudipa Majumdar, and Dr. Rajan for this awesome discussion that we had on the free trade agreement book written by Dr. Seshadri. We had an excellent panel discussion, and a person like me who doesn't actually know anything much about foreign trade agreements also understood so many things. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Symbiosis School of Economics, for co-hosting this book discussion. Dr. Chandiramani, thank you. I know you are not here, but thank you very much. Thanks to all the PIC members who are present here today and the students of Symbiosis for attending this session. And with this, I conclude today's discussion and session. Thank you very much.